All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my friend Mychal Denzel Smith. Mychal is a writer for The Nation magazine, which you can find at thenation.com, as well as Feministing, which you can find at feministing.com. You can also find him on Twitter at Mychal Smith. Mychal, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
All right, so Mychal, not that long ago, there was, we talk about police brutality, we talk about unchecked police violence a good deal on the show. You've talked about it on the show a couple times before here. But in New York City, many people heard about the choking death of Eric Garner. It's been ruled a homicide. I guess give us your take on what's happening in New York when it comes to this case, and kind of your overall take on police violence in general that's happening in New York City.
Yeah, I think that Jamel Bowie wrote a really good piece at Slate talking about how the broken windows policy will inevitably lead to these types of deaths, right? And so we're talking about Bill Bratton being appointed police commissioner for a second tenure in that position by Mayor de Blasio. Bill Bratton is the architect of the broken windows policing philosophy here in New York City, whereby petty crimes are treated are policed at a more heavily in hopes that then prevents more major crimes like robbery, like murder. So we'll spend more police energy on things like what Eric Garner was accused of doing, selling untaxed cigarettes and loitering, and apparently dancing on the subway is a crime that I didn't know was a crime. But cracking down on these so-called quality of life crimes is supposed to then lead to a reduction in major crimes. The studies just do not bear this out. Like, the facts on the ground just do not bear this out. Like, that is not what reduces crime. Like, we know how to actually reduce crime. We know how to invest in people and make sure that they have adequate and affordable housing, making sure that they have jobs and economic security, make sure that they have education, make sure they have access to recreation. Like, these are the things that prevent crime. But with Bill Bratton and as commissioner, what we have is this approach to policing, and whereby they believe that they can prevent crime by cracking down on these petty crimes. And yes, in that situation where you're having police interact with the public on a more regular basis on things that are very just minor, and you're going to have a police force that's trained in being more militarized, yes, the natural result of that is more beatings, more stompings, more harassment, more killing of everyday citizens. And who is going to bear the brunt of that is going to be communities that are already at risk, and that's going to be Black and brown people, that is going to be poor people, and it's just going to continue this cycle whereby we shuffle people in and out of the prison system, and we also experience police violence. I don't even call it police brutality. That would imply that that somehow the violence that they're enacting is somehow, abnormal. I think that this is the normal state of affairs for police in the United States of America. Like, this is what we think of as policing. This is what we want by virtue of writing laws and policy that gives them, unilateral access to this force. That this is the way that we want our police to behave. Like, this is what we sign them up to do. And so Eric Garner was caught on the wrong end of that because of this crackdown on these petty so-called quality of life crimes. And he was fed up, and that led to him being in an altercation with the police because he's suffering from this harassment day in and day out. And I think that, when you watch that video, which I did, and I'm upset with myself for doing so, but you watch that video and you see the exasperation. Like, he is completely just exhausted with the way that he's being treated by police, as anyone would be if their daily interaction with the police is one whereby the police are accusing them of doing something and they are questioning them without cause and they're trying to arrest you. And so yes, like that interaction like was preordained. Like that was going to happen if you police the way that Bratton believes is the most effective way of policing. And I just don't. I really just fundamentally disagree. And I believe that broken windows is a racist policy because because we're targeting only specific crimes, right? So like no, they're not. I think I've said this, like they're not cracking down on mail fraud in hopes that one day that they'll get insider trading, right? Like that's not a thing that they're doing. They're cracking down on the street crime and who is on the streets but Black and brown people.
I guess like because not just brutality but violence is so ingrained in the system, right? Yeah. That is something that is the system itself is brutal. The system itself is violent. It's so hard to like. Where do you? I mean, it really takes massive change is necessary, right? Because it's like you tweaks here and tweaks there are not going to fix this, you know, because it's part of the system. Where do we start to kind of get that to get the core of violence out of our policing system? Because again, it's like, you know, to me, it's like, I don't think, you know, police should have guns. I just like police should not have guns, you know? And then it seems to me that like there are so few rules of like, when are police allowed to use pepper spray? When are police allowed to use their batons? When are police allowed to use these type of things that we never really had that kind of even conversation. But I do think it's like, it's so far gone that even tiny little tweaks on that kind of stuff probably wouldn't even begin to start to help solve the problem here.
Yeah, we have to get to the fundamental question of what are we trying to accomplish with policing. And I think that what we've said so far is that we're trying to prevent crime. And the police, like the institution of policing is just not equipped to do that. It's just not going to fall in their purview. Like we cannot punish our way into a crime-free utopia. That's just not how this works. And I think that once we then like admit that to ourselves, like once we say the police cannot prevent crime, then we have to ask, okay, well, what then do we want police to do? I don't think that anyone is like advocating for the elimination of police altogether, but the reevaluating of what policing looks like. So what if we were training police in nonviolent mediation of disputes, right? Like, what if they came onto a scene and what they were charged with doing was not arresting people, was not like beating people up, was not beating people into submission, but ensuring that people resolve disputes in that moment, that before they escalate into violence? Or what if they were charged with ensuring that in the event of a violent situation, like let's say domestic violence or intimate partner violence, that they were charged with de-escalating the situation by removing the offender from the home instead of like going in and then assessing whether or not that was actually violent. Like let's just like, what does policing look like? What can we imagine it looking like absent of violence, absent of the idea that they are going to prevent these things from happening? And I think that, you know, we can only get to that point if we revoke their power to brutalize, to harm. We have to revoke that power, and then we have to then invest in a society whereby what they will be responding to doesn't exist at the rate that it does. So how then if we want to reduce rape, like what mechanisms do we need to actually reduce that? It's not going to happen just because we lock up rapists. Like it's just not. What do we do to ensure that we're teaching about consent? We're teaching about violence against women or violence against trans folks and things like that will actually prevent these rapes from happening in the first place, so that then when we get to a point where that is reduced, and we can talk about then how to deal with the rarity of it occurring, and that policing would not then include a violent aspect to it. And I think that's just, for me, what we have to get down to. What is the purpose of policing? And when we step back and we say, look, police cannot prevent crime, then we have to be more creative in the ways that we do prevent crime, and then we'll be more creative in the ways that we respond to what crime does happen, and the police will not be empowered to harass and harm the general public.